well, 1976, I went to the Washington Redskins with George Allen. Does anybody know who George Allen is? He's from Maryland, so, all right, he's a Hall of Fame football coach. And long about 1970, 71, 72, there was a Sports Illustrated article about George Allen, and he said he would like to have a young coach who had about 3 years of high school coaching experience and was single and was willing to do whatever he could to get into the National Football League. He'd be interested in bringing them on as an intern. Well, when I read the article, I think it was 70 or 71, I was the head football coach in a high school in Colorado. And that is not where I wanted to be. So I wrote him a letter. And so along about 1970, I was the head coach from 1973 to 1976. And after the 76 season, I resigned, and I said, I've had enough of the high school, so I wrote this letter to George Allen. And I had to go down and interview in Arizona. They were having a workout at Arizona, and then I had to go out and meet George Allen in Los Angeles, where they were having an owners meeting. So that was somehow I got the job, and so in 1976 I started as an intern with George Allen and the Washington Redskins. And what he did, I was in the second class. He'd bring 3 interns on each year, and he would hire one of them. Now what he did was, I don't know, not many of you knew who George Allen was, but his philosophy at the time was the future is now. So he didn't have a lot of draft picks because his philosophy was he always wanted the veteran type players. So he'd trade the draft picks. And I was looking up some of this, Googling it in preparation of this. There were so many of them that he traded away so many first round draft picks and second round and third round draft picks. He didn't have any. So he didn't have a lot of usage for scouts. So the interns were his scouts. So he'd put us on the road, and we'd go out and look at and we'd write the reports on the players and this, that, and everything. So it was kind of a cheap way of getting scouts, but they didn't really need scouts anyway because he traded all his picks away. And so then by the 5th and 6th rounds, then we'd give a report and we'd take a player, something like that. But anyway, so I was there from 76 to 77. Then at the end of 77, he went to the Los Angeles Rams and kind of left us high and dry. And so I went with our secondary coach, Ralph Hawkins. He went over to the Baltimore Colts. Now, do any of you remember the Baltimore Colts? Not the Indianapolis Colts. This was the predecessor to the Indianapolis Colts. So we were at the Baltimore Colts, and the head coach there was Ted Marchibroda. And so we were there, and our quarterback, do you remember him? Burt Jones. Burt Jones was our quarterback. Well, he was a great quarterback, but he had shoulder problems. He got hit in the shoulder one time, and so he kind of developed this shoulder problem, so that we really weren't playing with him all the time. He'd play, and then he'd be hurt again, and so we'd have to go the backup quarterback. Well, we didn't have real good success those 2 years. So Robert Irsay, the Irsay that owns the Indianapolis Colts now, his dad, I remember that it was after the season, Ted met with him. He said, "Oh yeah, you guys are okay, you come back." So then we went to my in-laws' house. That was in Illinois, and we're sitting in the living room, and all of a sudden it comes on television that Bob Irsay fires Ted Marchibroda and his staff. So we're out of a job again. So then in 1980, so that was 1980. That's when I went up to the Buffalo Bills with Chuck Knox as the head coach, and then when he went to Seattle, I stayed there with Case Stevenson, And at the end of 2 years with Kay Stevenson, he and I didn't see eye to eye, so to speak, so he let me go. And that's why I say that was about 1985. Our daughter comes down here to Rice, and we stay up there for another year. And then in 1986, we came down here to the Houston Oilers with Jerry Glanville as the head coach. And then Jerry Glanville, we lasted 2 years with Jerry. He was a comical guy, and yeah, when you try to coach seriously, we didn't get along that well. So anyway, make a long story short, he let me go. Then, at that time, I decided to get into. We had moved the family around so much, we decided to get into maybe a little safety part of it, and so I got a job with the Blesto Scouting Combine. Is anybody aware of the different scouting combines? The National Football League has two scouting combines. They have the National Scouting Combine, and there's about, I don't know how many. The majority of the teams belong to the National Scouting Combine, and then there's a handful of teams that belong to the Blesto Scouting Combine. And I got a job with the Blesto Scouting Combine, and then they kind of changed policies. Anyway, to make a long story short, I went with I was added to the staff of the Washington Redskins and still worked for Blesto, but the contract was through the Washington Redskins. So I did that about a spring and a fall. And then they hired me on full-time at the Redskins. So I became part of the Redskins with Charlie Casserly. Does anybody know who Charlie Casserly is? Okay, the professors do. All right, he's on TV, he's on the NFL Network, but he was on CBS for a while. But he was the general manager of the Washington Redskins. Now, going back to the internship program, I was the second intern program for George Allen, and Charlie was in the third internship program with the Washington Redskins. Well, he wanted to stay in the personnel. My goal in this whole thing was to be a college football coach. That's all I ever wanted to do. But obviously, because of family issues and things like that, I needed to have a job. So I kind of worked my way through the coaching. I coached for about 10 years, and then this opportunity in scouting developed. So Charlie was the general manager, so I worked with him at the Redskins for about 12 years. I had the southeast part of the country, which was pretty plentiful as far as football players were concerned. And then when Daniel Snyder bought the Washington Redskins, he and Charlie didn't get along, so he let Charlie go, which is something that he is, after the fact, so to speak, had kind of regretted, because Charlie ran a pretty good program. So anyway, let's see, what was that, 1999, I think it was, Charlie was let go, and that was the last draft I had with the Washington Redskins. Anyway, Bob McNair started the Houston Texans. He wanted to hire Charlie as the first general manager of the Houston Texans. And so at the Redskins, I did college scouting, and like I said, the southeast part of the country. Well, since I lived here, and we kept our home here since 1986 when we came down with the Oilers, that he put me in pro scouting. So I went into the pro scouting part of it with the Houston Texans. And then after that, in 2007, after the 2006 draft, Charlie was let go, and so and Kubiak came in. So I worked a year with Kubiak and Rick Smith, and then my contract was up in 2007. So then I they did not renew my contract in 2007. And we were talking earlier, and this is just a sidelight because it only happened to, they had NFL International, or the NFL Europe program, and I'm not sure any of you knew about that. Anybody hear about the NFL Europe? It was an off-season type program that they played games in the spring, and they played them over in Europe, where they kind of brought NFL players and brought them into teams and let them compete as well. That folded in 2006, and so the NFL wanted a presence in Europe, so I was able to go over there and help work with that program, and we found European players, and we'd have these little tryouts, and then we'd go to mini camps and that sort of thing in Europe, so which was a lot of fun because I got to travel all over Europe. In 2009, Martin Mayhew, who had been an intern with us at the Washington Redskins, needed a pro scout, so I went up to the Detroit Lions in 2009, and then I just retired from the Detroit Lions after last season.